Dayton, Tennessee, July 10th, 1925. It was the day a 24-year-old teacher named John Thomas Scopes went on trial for teaching Darwin's theory of evolution in a public school classroom.
John Scopes was new to town. He had just come down from Illinois, where he grew up, and he came down as the new football coach. But he also taught general science. Scopes' indictment became front-page news around the country as soon as it happened.
Hundreds of people streamed into the Ray County Courthouse. It was the hottest summer anyone could remember. In the courtroom, said a reporter, it felt like a blast furnace.
This was the very first trial in American history that was covered by the broadcast media.
I think that the only thing they were down here for was to propound the theory of evolution, and this was a great place to do it.
Evolution was about to go on trial with an unusual cast of characters. A group of civic boosters trying to put their little town on the map. A judge who believed he'd been chosen by God. A prosecution attorney who spent his evenings drinking bootleg liquor with the defense. And a chimpanzee named Joe Mendy.
He would have a little hat on. He had a suit on with a vest. And, of course, we were always excited about seeing Joe.
At the center of it all, two of the most colorful and controversial men in America. During the 8-day trial, they would fight an epic battle. A duel over science and religion. Faith and agnosticism. The Book of Darwin and the Book of Genesis. Dayton, Tennessee, population 1,800. Founded after the Civil War, Dayton was surrounded by hills, strawberry farms, and coal mines.
We had nice hotels here, good businesses here, good churches here, good schools here.
Eloise Reed was 12 years old in 1925. Her brother played on John Scopes' football team. Scopes spent most of his time coaching his students, but he loved science. Darwin's theory of evolution, he said, was the only plausible explanation of man's long and torturous journey to his present physical and emotional development. Published in 1859, Charles Darwin's Origin of Species set forth one of the single most revolutionary ideas in history. It described a process by which organisms evolved over millions of years from simple to complex through survival of the fittest. But to most people, evolution meant just one thing.
I think when people thought evolution, they didn't think of anything terribly scientific. They thought of the basic idea that humans descended from monkeys.
Evolution had been taught in Tennessee schools since the turn of the century. The official textbook in Dayton's high school was Hunter's Civic Biology.
It was the most popular public school biology textbook in the entire country, and the one required for use in every public school in the state of Tennessee. It was strictly Darwinian. By the 1920s, you couldn't find a textbook that wasn't heavily evolutionary in its orientation.
You can't make a monkey out of me. Oh, no. You can't make a monkey out of me. No, no, I am human through and through.
But in 1925, under pressure from Christian fundamentalists, Tennessee became the first state in the Union to outlaw the teaching of evolution. The new law made it a crime for any public school teacher to, quote, teach any theory that denies the story of the divine creation of man as taught in the Bible, and to teach instead that man had descended from a lower order of animals. Teachers who violated the law could be fined. The governor of Tennessee signed the bill on March 23rd.
And you can't make a monkey out of me.
Most people thought the new law would never be enforced.
Look, the anti-evolution law didn't change anything. It didn't change anything. And yet it was important to pass it, not because it was going to rule. They had textbooks in Tennessee which taught evolution. So any teacher who used those textbooks had to teach evolution. The importance of that, it was a symbolic law. It was a law symbolizing who was right, who was legitimate. Religion was legitimate. Darwin was not legitimate in the state of Tennessee.
A world away in New York City, news about the Tennessee law appeared in the papers. The story came to the attention of a struggling new organization called the American Civil Liberties Union.
From the very beginning, the ACLU was advocating freedom of speech for ideas from the most extreme left, anarchists and socialists, to the most extreme right, including in the early days the Ku Klux Klan, Henry Ford, and others who would now be considered more toward the fascist end of the spectrum.
2 months after the law was passed, the ACLU placed a notice in all the major Tennessee newspapers inviting a teacher to challenge it.
The ACLU was not advocating for or against religion. It probably wasn't even advocating for or against the validity of the theory of evolution. As always, the ACLU was seeking to advocate an abstract principle, a neutral principle of tolerance for debate and dispute, the right to air any idea, including evolution, but also including anti-evolutionary ideas.
Back in Tennessee, strawberries ripened in the fields, and Ray County High School prepared for graduation. But hard times had come to Dayton. The once prosperous coal and iron mines were closing down. A New Yorker named George Rapelier had been hired to manage the bankruptcy. Rapelier became a friend of John Scopes and began attending services at a liberal Protestant church.
And there he'd run into a minister who was both an evolutionist and a Christian. And at that time, Rapelier began combining the two views and thought you could be a Christian and also be an evolutionist. So when the Tennessee legislature considered the anti-evolution laws, he wrote letters to his legislator and also to the Chattanooga Times arguing against passage of that law. He loved to make fun of it. Then, one day in May in 1925, he saw in the newspaper the ACLU offer to defend any school teacher who was willing to challenge that law in court.
Rapelier had an inspiration. Why not bring the trial to Dayton and give the town some excitement and a much-needed economic boost? He rushed off to Robinson's drugstore.
This is the spot where Robinson's drugstore stood, right next to the big Aqua Hotel. And this is where, around the table in Robinson's drugstore, the Scopes trial originated.
Now, Robinson at the time was chairman of the local school board, and his downtown drugstore had a soda fountain that served as the watering hole for the business and professional